Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And welcome to Go Astros. I'm your host, James Christopher. And before we jump into the show, we are looking at some of the images from New Orleans, Louisiana, and Hurricane Ida. And, you know, we as Houstonians, people from the city of Houston, know what a hurricane is, what a hurricane can do. I remember as a kid, and this is obviously the folly of youth, but I remember when Hurricane Alicia hit. And when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, it's sort of neat. You know, you're going to be holed up in the house. Your mom gets snacks. You've got games, whatever. Obviously now a 40-something-year-old man, not saying the age on the air, it's obviously a much different experience. And watching what happened to the city of Houston during Harvey. So I want to do a special shout-out to all the Houstonians, Mattress Mac, and all those folks who are working really, really hard to help the people of Louisiana get through this. You know, the Houston Texans are hosting LSU. The Dallas Cowboys are hosting the Saints. Like the idea that we are being good neighbors to the state of Louisiana. And so we encourage everybody to, you know, donate some canned goods to the Salvation Army. You know, donate. Do your best to help out. The stories of like the Cajun Navy from Hurricane Harvey are now legendary. We got to do our best to help our neighbors. Although it's funny because the Texas Rangers didn't want to help their neighbors in 2017, which is why they are my least favorite baseball team on the planet. But what a great segue. We're going to be talking about the series win against the Rangers this weekend, what lies ahead. We've got Brian Arbor coming up, and we've got Andy Tom Chesson coming up. And we're going to flip the lineup up today because I think we lose every game that we've dropped to Go Astros where Andy goes first and Brian goes second. So we're going to flip that around to, you know, just change the lineup a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit different look. We're going to move Andy to the 2-hole and maybe he can drive in some runs. So stay with us. We got a great show coming up. So like I said in the opening, we're switching the lineup up and we're going to lead off with Brian Arbor, hopefully. Because, Brian, I think the Astros are like 0-4 whenever you go first and Andy goes second on the day that a show is dropped. So we're going to do our best.
If that works, absolutely.
Absolutely. Overall impressions, I mean, I tend to throw out 13-2 losses as aberrations. Still, you took 2 of 3 from the Rangers. Can't really be upset about it.
Yeah, and they moved up 3 games in the division since then. They're in a position where they're a 98% chance to win the division in Fangraphs playoffs odds, which again, I think it was like 93 last week. But overall, a good week. They played well. Outside of yesterday, they pitched well in particular, and so yeah, they're rewarded in the win-loss column.
I also hate being mad at Tony Kemp, but I'm pretty mad at Tony Kemp right now.
He's hard to be mad at, but I'd only give him half a hug right now.
Only half a hug. Let's talk about the pitching staff. So, you know, Abreu notwithstanding, I made the joke on Twitter that we need to quit making Fetch happen, and right now he is Fetch. But it looks like Urquidy, another great start in Sugarland. Do you see the 6-man rotation coming, and is that the best idea?
I do think it's coming. I guess the good news, I mean, the worst 6-man rotation is Jake Odorizzi is clearly your 6th best starting pitcher, but he's pitched okay. And he gave up 2 runs and 5 and change, and gave up had a similar start against Kansas City. So, you know, this is not, you know, I'm not starting up the Cy Young bandwagon for Jake Odorizzi, but part of what I think, particularly as you get late in the season, is Urquidy's on schedule to start either Friday or Saturday in San Diego. And if he starts Friday, they can give every one of their starters a week between games. They get another off day. Then you get an off day the following Thursday, and that's another week for your starters. And so at this time of year, that's a way to give them a little sort of extra boost. So I think, you know, I think there are benefits to the other guys. They are, as we know, certainly trying to limit the innings that Luis Garcia pitches. And of course, again, as I said at the beginning of this, 98% chance of winning the division. They're worried not just about next week. They're not just worried about the first week in September. They've got to do well in the first week of October.
So speaking of Luis Garcia, does it sort of make sense then to maybe forego the 6-man rotation and maybe move him to the bullpen and start sort of doing? I imagine we're going to see him doing a lot of tandem starting in the bullpen, similar to LMJ and Charlie Morton in 17. So does it make sense to start to maybe do that now and give Odorizzi 5 innings because he's really good until he gets to 6, and then let Luis finish it out from there?
We'll see. I don't know if they've made a decision yet on what their plan is for October, but I could certainly see, and I think it could work in October to have, Luis Garcia as a multi-inning reliever, Christian Javier as a multi-inning reliever, and maybe Garcia pitches a time through the order in game 2 and game 4 of the division series, and Javier does that in games 1 and 3. And, hopefully you can avoid a game 5 that way.
Yeah. I want to talk bullpen too. It's obviously been better, and there's been aberrations, and there's been, I think Dusty still makes some of his really questionable moves. On the one hand, he said in this press conference yesterday that he didn't want to burn the bullpen. I get that, but I feel like with this offense, no game's out of reach, and winning games now means you can rest guys later. If they had won that game last night, they'd be 6.5 up, which meant the 6 games by math against Oakland later on wouldn't have mattered anyway. But that's what happened. How do you feel? First of all, let's talk Kendall Graveman. It's a little weird.
Yes.
Not a lot of games in a row. Like, in my thought, if you're ahead in a playoff game in October, he's pitching, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days in a row. Are you concerned about his inability or unwillingness to pitch multiple days?
Yes, that is tempered by the fact this is a regular season. They are up by 5.5 games in the division and have a 98% chance of winning the division. So had they gotten in a situation, so Dusty said that Graveman was unavailable yesterday and Presley was unavailable yesterday. Presley had pitched back-to-back. He had saved both Friday and Saturday night's games. So they got in a situation late where they're up by a run or two. You're looking at a bullpen of, I guess, Javier and Yimi Garcia would have pitched the 9th, which is okay, but you don't have to. I think I said to somebody, since you're 6.5, you're 5.5, 6.5 games up, you don't have to pretend you're Gene Walk in 1964. So the weirder thing to me about Graveman is, there's been a lot of sort of weird talk about sort of his readiness and ability the last couple of days, including things Dusty said, I think, on Friday about trying to avoided him in that game. He had a really weird outing where he didn't have great control on Saturday, but ended up, to get enough pitches over, but instead of getting the ground balls he just got a bunch of pop-ups, which is different, but ended up being ineffective in the end. So this may just be, Dusty said he's still adjusting to being a reliever. This is his first year as a full-time reliever. I am not too worried about. I'm looking at this stuff. What I'm thinking about this is moving towards October, and it's only a problem if Kendall Graveman can't go back-to-back days in the 8th inning in October.
And my assumption is, I think one of the things that bugged fans, and I don't know why it bugs fans, but Graveman had said on days he just doesn't feel like he's got it. It seems to me I'd rather an athlete be up front and say, I don't know, man, I don't know where it's going to end up, versus sort of gutting through it and blowing a game. And he did have a home run a couple days ago as well, the same game that Presley blew. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't you rather the guy just be sort of up front with Dusty about what he's feeling, what he thinks he can do?
Yeah, absolutely. And and again, the goal and the concern here is October. And they want to win tonight in Seattle. And, it's, again, a really productive week the last week to sort of put in a position where they can be a little less worried about the division race. They played well, and Oakland didn't have a good week until last night. But in general, they're, if you don't have to put the pedal to the metal right now. And the other thing is, there's a lot of good players on this team. And so you don't have to put it all on Kendall Graveman. You don't have to put it all on Luis Garcia. If you rest those guys a little bit, we've seen Aledmus Diaz in the lineup 2 out of the last 3 days now that everyone's back and healthy. And we'll continue to see that because he's a really good player, and there's no reason to put your starters every single day of September, particularly with the division lead where it is.
I want to talk again about bullpen makeup, and then I want to look pitching staff long term, since this is apparently the pitching segment. It doesn't make sense to me, Brian, that we do not have a traditional long innings eater reliever on this team right now. We've got a bunch of guys, because Javier is supposed to be that guy, and now let's be honest, he is a 1 to maybe 1+ inning guy. We don't have a Brandon Belak who you say, listen, the game's out of hand, I need you to finish it for me. Why, I guess, is my first question. And that seems to be a pretty big mistake when we do have games like yesterday where the game is over in the 4th or 5th inning.
They have 14 pitchers on the staff right now?
Yeah.
So part of the reason is that there are 9 guys in the bullpen. So, James, when you and I were, learning baseball in the 80s and early 90s, there were 11-man pitching staffs, and that was everyone thought was a little much. They'd most recently gone to the 5-man rotation. And so, in that situation, you do need, okay, we're down big today. I need you to go out there and wear this one. And, we'll save our best relievers and hopefully use them tomorrow. So they used Correa, who had the awful, and then they used Taylor Maton. Okay, so maybe those guys don't pitch tonight, but I'm not worried about the game tonight. And they have Presley and Graveman and Javier and Yimmy. They got plenty of guys to get through tonight. So because staffs are larger, there's less need for that multi-inning, long inning relief guy than there was when staffs were much shorter and had 3 different platoons in your offense.
Okay, yeah, a good point. Something I didn't even think about, the fact that we do have just bigger pitching staff, so you don't necessarily need that anymore. Okay, so last question then about the pitching staff. Just about 2 months from now, we'll start talking about the 2022 rotation. Do you give Justin Verlander a qualifying offer?
Yes. The biggest reason it's hard for me to say is, I'm a doctor, but I'm a doctor of philosophy and political science. I'm not a doctor of medicine, nor have I read Justin Verlander's medical reports. So the question is, will he come back? He's a Hall of Fame pitcher. He's an inner circle Hall of Famer and the most respected pitcher of his generation against either him or Kershaw. He is also 38 going on 39, if I have that right. I may be off a year on the age, but the point is, right, he's an older guy. He keeps himself in fabulous shape. He's a determined player. So, the question I can't answer from the outside is, how good's his arm going to be next year? What projections can we make? What are the doctors telling Verlander, and what are they telling James Click in the Astros front office? Stepping out from that, qualifying offers are essentially a 1-year contract extension at something like $19 or $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion is your downside risk of that is low. I suspect that Verlander will sign a contract for more than that. And therefore, he's likely to turn that down. But even if he accepts the qualifying offer, getting 1 year of Justin Verlander, even if it's a Justin Verlander at 80% for $20 million, that's, I think, that's a cost. I'm going to say the Astros are going to, some of their payroll goes down next year. Verlander's contract is off the books. Greinke's contract is off the books. And unfortunately, Correa's contract is going to be off the books. So they're not in the sort of right up against the luxury tax situation, or they were over it last year. So there's a little more financial flexibility. If you make that qualifying offer to Verlander and he takes it, I think you're in okay shape. So with the caveat that, if the doctor's going to tell me this guy's never going to pitch again, caveat that I don't know what's in those medical reports, I'd make the qualifying offer.
Okay, and then last question, and we'll kind of revisit this as we go. What would be a number that you would feel comfortable offering Correa that would also help keep the team long-term viable when it comes to being competitive?
I mean, who do you trust? Who do you think is going to be better over the next decade, Correa or Francisco Lindor? And Francisco Lindor got a contract for $340 million over 11 years. And Correa was never going to sign a 5-year contract for $125, not for $25 million a year. And certainly he's going to look for years. The only way to get inside a short-term contract is to make it really big per year, something like $35 million for 5 years if you want to limit the years. So maybe that's the best, most creative way to go. I suspect Correa's preference, I think he said this to the beginning of the year, is to sign as long a term a contract as possible. And that's usually what we see with players, if they want to get as many guaranteed years as possible, because, you know, it's good to go up to free agent when you're 27, like Correa is going to be.
Yeah,
Correa is in the prime of his career. It's less desire being a free agent when you're in your 30s, like you would be after 5 years.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it seems to me I would be happier to go shorter term, big annual value, because you're not going to be as hamstrung down the road. But that's, obviously the balance the Astros are watching. All right, Brian, we'll be back next week, hopefully with a little bit of a distance. I will say this, it's sort of fun watching the Mariners kind of get back in the race. I've always sort of have an affection for Scott Service from his time in the Astros. So it's been a little fun to watch that happen.
You like me, though, you watch Scott Service manage one day and you think, well, there's a right-hander the next day, Ed Taubensee should be managing that day.
I do think that sometimes too. Well played, sir. We will talk to you next week.
Indeed. Good to talk to you.
So like I said, we've got Andy batting second today because we're trying to change the lineup up, because, Andy, I figured it out that we lose just about every single game when we drop an episode that day.
Well, but that didn't happen this past week because the Astros went 4-1. And when last we recorded, we said they were going to have to take these last two from the Royals, and they were going to have to take at least 2 of 3 from the Rangers, if not sweep the Rangers.
Oh.
And they went 4-1. So I think, streaks as they go are a little streaky.
First of all, do we still love Tony Kemp, or are we a little annoyed at him today?
Nope. Always going to love Tony Kemp. There's nothing he's going to do, outside of joining the clan that's going to make me think that maybe Tony Kemp's not the guy I thought he was. He's fun. I don't want to say marginal. He's a above replacement level player, not much more than that. He's a spark plug. He's fast. He's a good teammate. He's a great clubhouse guy. And he's, from what I can gather, just genuinely a good person. So
yeah,
you get a lot of leeway when that's you.
Yeah, true. And now we can say, I did hit up the Chick-fil-A this morning. You can see the evidence here. And I look, I'm not going to keep this going, but I had to remind Joe Boo that we're no longer eating for 2 fan bases, that the Yankees can now go and lose every game from here on out.
Well, they tried to this weekend, didn't they? Dropping 2 or 3 to the A's.
Yeah, it's obviously not. It's so weird to me how they went from just hammering the baseball to scoring 3 runs. Was it 3 runs in 2 games?
Yep.
Including against and 2 very pedestrian pitchers for the A's.
For as knowledgeable a fan base and as history laden as that fan base claims that they get really high on streaks just like everybody else and think they're never going to lose a game again. And then all of a sudden they drop 2-3 to the A's. And I needed them to win that series. They didn't. And of course we dropped a game and we shouldn't have. And all of a sudden we're back down to a 5.5 game lead. But I think it's very interesting that their starting pitching is much better than I was expecting it to be at this point of the season. But without Cole on the mound, that team plays differently. And I don't know what that is exactly. I'm sure that's a causation, not being, correlation sort of thing. But
yeah,
it's I don't think the Yankees are as scary as the Yankees think the Yankees are.
Yeah, and it's very interesting how that fan base is, because that fan base to a person wrote them off a month ago.
For sure. Yeah. And then if you looked on Friday night, they're not going to lose another game this season. I think we're going to sweep straight through the playoffs. You people are idiots.
Yeah.
There's still a whole month to play.
A whole
magic numbers are still in the 20s, high 20s.
Speaking of magic numbers and numbers in the 20s, the Astros clearly still up there. But does the division race, barring train wreckage, feel over to you?
I will feel better when we get through this Seattle series, and really both Seattle series. I think that there's a whole lot going on. I think it will certainly be over by the time we see the A's again. We have a healthy diet of Angels and Rangers over in September
with a side of D-backs.
A side of D-backs, and I don't want to count anything against the D-backs because we suck against teams that are really, really bad. But I think we'll get up for the Angels. We certainly play the Mariners well historically, but the Mariners are a team that are very streaky. We go there for 3 tonight, and then we have 3 next week against them at home. I think we can, not mathematically, but certainly get very close to wrapping it up after we finish those 6 with there. And we've got a road series against a struggling Padres team sandwiched in between those.
Yeah, and it's funny to me how different 5.5 feels over 3.5. Especially with, for as much as the A's split with the Yankees this last series, nothing about the A's seems scary to me. And the fact is, I think we've won 12 of the meetings we've played with them so far. I mean, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, we've already won the season series with them, so they virtually have to be ahead of us by a game by the time the season's over to have the division. The interesting thing is that for as much time as it looks like, the wild card team was going to come out of the West and it's probably going to be the A's, and the Mariners made a run. The A's are struggling right now, this weekend notwithstanding, and they're in danger of missing out the wild card completely. Which will be interesting because not only are they still trying to catch the Astros, but they've got the Rangers nipping on not the Rangers. The Rangers blow Chunks. And Chunks isn't even happy about it.
Yeah.
The Mariners are 2 games behind the A's. So they've got pressure from both ends. And some people do well with that. Some people don't. So I think the A's are in a really precarious position. And certainly Marte was a good pickup for them, but I think losing their center fielder hurt them, not necessarily from a production standpoint, but from a just overall morale standpoint, because it felt like, one more thing that we have to overcome. And I think they've struggled with that a little bit since he went out.
Maybe they'll make the playoffs out of Vegas in 2023.
Well, one can hope that Vegas is a new life for them, because it ain't going to happen in Oakland.
It's not going to happen in Oakland. Lineup is healthy for the first time. It looks like we really now can roll. Now it's the problem of shifting enough people around because you can keep Diaz in the lineup, which is a bat I think you want to keep in there. Just overall thoughts on that, on finally feeling like the team is back together for the first time since June. Has that really been what the issue has been for this baseball team, particularly through the month of August?
I don't know specifically if that's the issue. It's more consistency. So we are less than 30 games, I think 32 games, somewhere in that neighborhood before the end of the season. We're on pace to win 96 games. So it's not like the struggles have been detrimental to them. Right. I think it's been more detrimental to the mental health of their fans than it has been to the club. But what you want to see is starting to get in a routine of, this is the lineup that we're rolling with, and I can count on Michael Brantley to do this. So if I'm Alex Bregman and I'm going to bat third at some point, I need to know what I'm bringing to the table, and I need to know what Yordan Alvarez is going to bring to the table, who, by the way, has been on fire for the last week. It feels like he's made the adjustments against the adjustment the league made on him earlier this year, because he's starting to just hammer balls that he has no business of hitting anymore.
And I messaged, we talked about this offline. I don't know that I've ever seen a more effortless look when a guy hits the ball 400 feet at 112 miles an hour. It's just, he flicks his wrist and the ball goes far.
Yeah, there was the one against the Rangers yesterday on Sunday. I think there was one against the Royals on Tuesday that it looked like he swung one-handed, and I know he didn't because I saw the replay, but it's just no effort at all, and the ball went 407 feet almost directly to dead center field. He's just got massive power, and I think that in a weird way he got almost too patient. And when you start when you get a reputation for looking at a bunch of balls outside, umpires get tired of that, and they shouldn't, because they should be calling the actual strike zone. He was getting rung up on a lot of stuff that are outside breaking balls. And I think he's made that adjustment because he's just tattooing balls, and even the balls he's not hitting out, or he's hitting hard and making productive outs, which is a problem for this lineup. We have a problem making productive outs. We're horrible at situational hitting. I know we've talked about that, but I feel very good, back to your original question, about having everybody back. I think Saturday was the first time since June 11th that we've had our intended lineup intact. And I think that small sample size, it's super early to be making this, but Chas McCormick is about to get Wally pipped by Jake Myers in center field.
We have a Wally Pip reference on Let's Get To. Wow. Yeah, but it's funny. I think both of us sort of, you and I are much more cautious than Astros Twitter when it comes to a player that comes up and makes a statement. We were cautious with Chas McCormick overtaking Straw, and we've been pretty cautious with Myers. But it feels like, neither McCormick or Straw make that play in center field yesterday.
Right.
Which was Willie Mays, but with a concussion.
If StatCast is to be believed, nobody in Astros history has made that catch.
Okay, there you go. But
There's
also
less than a 5%. I think there was a less than a 5% catch probability on that,
But he's he's hitting for average. He's hitting with power, and he's hitting in pressure situations. It isn't a situation where he's going 3 for 3 and we win by 10 runs. I mean, he's getting key RBIs.
What I like about him, and again, such a small sample size, and the league is certainly going to adjust on him. But I think the real thing I like about him is his approach. He's not trying to kill the ball every time he comes up to the plate. And I think one of the things that you see, even with Chas McCormick, who I think generally has a good chance, he will get in certain situations where all he's trying to do is hit the ball out of the park. And major league pitchers can exploit that. Myers is very controlled at the plate, and I don't know if it's because he's 25 and a little bit more mature than what you'd normally see as a call-up at this point. And I love that we act like 25 is some ancient age for a prospect. Like, oh no, he'd only be able to be productive for 8 more years. Okay, great. But
Jake Myers is the guy we thought we were getting when we got Miles Straw. And if you want to show your kids, or even for yourself, learn how to actually play outfield baseball without running around with your pants on fire, watch Jake Myers field a pop fly. He runs to his spot if it's over his head. Then he turns around, and then he puts his glove up and catches the ball, which is what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to go wild, flailing your arms around and hope that it hits your glove in the right spot, which is what Straw did for the first couple of months of this season. He got better. But Myers has that natural ability. He has the speed, and he has a much better approach with the plate with power. The great thing about him is he's not trying to tattoo and kill the ball every time. He's hitting in situations where it requires to hit behind the runners or to take a ball to left field, and he has the ability to do all that. So I'm super impressed with him. I hope that he continues, but even if it's a flash in the pan for the rest of this season, I'm good. We got what we invested in him.
All right. As we wrap up, we asked the same thing for Brian. So, we're going to obviously Correa watch starts now. I think the quote in The Athletic kind of makes that a thing we have to focus on. What do you feel like today is an amount of money you're willing to pay him, knowing that we have both said that our goal is for this organization to be the Cardinals, meaning pretty good year in, year out, and not necessarily throwing a bunch of money at one guy. So what do you feel like the Astros should do as far as trying to keep Correa?
I think somewhere probably what you were willing to go to with Verlander, because I think Correa is that important to the franchise. but obviously for a longer term. So, 33 a year for, I don't know, 7 years, 5 years, or, 5 years with a couple of options at the end and, mutual options, however that works. So Correa has an out that's attractive to him. He could still test free agency. The thing is, if you give him a 7-year contract, he's still only 33 when he comes out of it. So there's still a time for the Yankees to really overpay him because they burned through 5 prospects at that point. The interesting thing with Correa is, that article was posturing. That thought was absolutely Correa's, and Kaplan didn't misquote him, but that was his agent speaking. We're letting you know that you're on the clock, Houston Astros, and we're mentally okay with it not working out. That conversation isn't over. I'm not saying it's going to work out. I'm saying it's not over yet. B, I really don't hope that we have to listen for the rest of the season about, Correa made a great play. That's the last time we're going to see that. Oh, that's so sad. It's baseball, and this franchise has existed for next year 65 years. It will continue, and they'll continue to be competitive, whether that's Jeremy Pena, whether that is Aledmus Diaz, whether that is Trevor Story, whether that whoever.
Whether it's Alex Bregman.
It is Bregman, and we find a better third baseman. Chapman's going to be a free agent. I mean, he sucks right now, and that's good for us. Let him continue to suck, at least, for a little bit, get him on a friendly deal, and then we can turn him around.
Yeah.
I feel good about that. But I'm interested to see how the shortstop market turns out, because you got to think Seager is going to re-sign with the Dodgers. I think that's probably going to happen. The Mets don't need him. The Yankees seem to have an internal prospect that they favor over going free agency. Now, the Yankees could absolutely reverse course, and they can afford to do that. I don't think Boston necessarily needs him. Maybe they do. But then you're getting down into teams that don't historically pay giant contracts, at least for long term, that he seems to want. So then it comes down to, do I have a chance to win and make money? And what are we talking about there? The White Sox? Tim Anderson's not going to give up his role anytime soon. Cubs are in a rebuilding mode. So it'll be really, really interesting to see.
Detroit.
I mean, maybe. And Hinch has done great things with Detroit this year, but they're a couple of years away. JP Crawford, is affordable for Seattle. I think Seattle's on the come as far as being a team that's going to contend in the next couple of years. But I don't know that they're going to be the team that gives Correa what he wants. It's going to be really interesting to see who's in the market for a shortstop and who's in the market for that level of shortstop. I think at the end of the day, the Astros end up re-signing him, and I think it's for a long-term deal. But it'll be really interesting to watch. And the other thing that we continue to talk about is what happens with the CBA at the end of November through however long it takes to get that negotiated, and how does that affect what a free agent deal is ultimately going to look like? That's a huge piece of it as well.
Well, I know that you're never going to be a free agent. He's Andy Tom Chesson. That wraps up this episode of Go Astros. We'll be back next weekish sometimes. Go Stros, man.
Hopefully after 6 more wins.